Hey everyone, it's Keeping It Real with Nikki and Jim. How are you doing today, Jim?
Yeah, I'm doing wonderful. It's been snowing outside,
It
so
has been.
it's a
Welcome to
cold
Pacific
one.
Northwest. I know it's freezing and it didn't go away, it stayed.
I know it's cold.
So we've been doing a big long process and today is our last day of the series. I'm really excited. I think we had some good information, don't you think?
Excellent. It'll be great to have our special guests on today. So I'm looking
Yeah,
forward to it.
me too, because we're going to close up the process here. So before we get started, let's bring in Carrie Selby with Fairway Mortgage. And hi, Carrie, how's it going?
Good. Just surviving the snowpocalypse.
I know, right? So much. Yeah, like a little bit, but howdy
Tiny flurries.
So tell me what's going on in the market with the mortgage going on today.
Things weren't so great after our holiday weekend. They kind of were seeing a lot of red. Today was the first day of the week that we've seen a little bit of green. So back in the positive, but it caused rates to go up just a little bit this week.
Okay.
Not significantly, but just enough to make a little bit of a difference.
Yeah.
So where are we about?
Still around 6.25. Well, probably I would say 6.5 to 6.75.
Okay.
It's the national average. Yeah. So still staying in that spot. Like I said, it was impactful, but not to the point where it made a dramatic change. But we're still not going to where we're seeing lower interest rates because the market just is not responding very well to everything going on.
Right. But as Jim said though last week, you know what? If you wait forever, you might never get the house. So sometimes the time is now and it's dealing with some of the, the rates and stuff like that later or, moving on. So it just depends on your needs and it's not right for everybody. It's right for some people. It just, you got to do what you got to do, right?
Exactly. And that's really kind of segues into what we're talking about next week, right? Is the benefit of buying versus renting. So we can definitely go into more detail about the benefits for sure.
Definitely. That's going to be a fun one.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have a special guest today. Her name is Vickie Lawrence, and is with Pacific Northwest Title. She has been there for 21 whole years. That seems like forever to me, at least, because I've only been doing real estate for 7, and that seems like forever. So I can't imagine what she's doing. She does business development, and she's a marketing rep. And she was actually born and raised here in Kitsap County and lives in Port Orchard with her family. So I'm going to bring Vickie on now. Welcome, Ms. Vickie. How are you?
Hey.
Fantastic. Thanks, you guys, for having me today. Hi, Carrie.
Hi. I love working with Vickie. She's such a professional and she really knows her business. So I'm excited to hear what she talks about today.
Yes, she really does. So Vickie, tell me a little bit about Pacific Northwest Title.
So Pacific Northwest Title is a locally owned and operated title and escrow company here in Kitsap County. We've been doing business for over 32 years in Kitsap County. And we are underwritten by 2 national underwriters, so First American and Old Republic, which allows us the opportunity to be locally owned and grown and working our business in Kitsap County, but having 2 national underwriters to support and write for properties and price points out of the area and surrounding on larger properties. So we've got 3 office locations. Our main office is in Silverdale. We've got a signing office in Port Orchard and an escrow operating office up on Bainbridge Island. So we can cover all of Kitsap County's avenues and working our magic, doing title and escrow and real estate services.
Perfect. And you do a lot of magic. So we've been kind of going through our buying process and we've been talking about kind of our step and we're getting down to the very end here. But we kind of skipped a little bit over on title. And I mentioned it last week. We have title and it's, we said it's to make sure that you don't have any clouds on your title when you get your property. It's a clear title. Can you elaborate a little bit more and tell us more about that?
So what title insurance is ensuring is we're evaluating risk on a property. So when you're purchasing your transaction or your property, you want to make sure that you have a clean bill of goods and transferring a property with no clouds and encumbrances that would hinder you from complete ownership of that property. So what we do is we check the chain of title from back to the 1800s, back to the beginning of the time of 1836, I believe it is, to current to clear any judgments, liens, encumbrances that will cloud your title report and hinder you from transferring it from one party to the next. So when we get a new transaction in, we check to see if we've had a prior title, which that's industry jargon to check and see if we've had a prior, if we've insured it in the past. which means we've checked it from the 1800s and cleared anything that has touched that property or the seller in the beginning of time to make sure that when it's transferred from that new purchaser, that they have a clean title, which means someone's not going to be knocking down your door saying, hey, why are you living in my property? So, the misconception on title insurance, it's a one-time premium that you pay for the lifetime of you and your heirs that own the property. And traditionally, we're checking for judgments, liens, easements, monetary liens, such as mortgages, deeds of trust, those type of things that are that come along with people and purchasing and just life. So we are pulling all that information from the county records, and then we're producing a title report, which then once you get a signed around contract, escrow works with title to clear those liens and items to transfer that title to the new purchaser. So kind of
Hey, Vickie, what are some of the common things that would come up on a title that would be concerning, and maybe the remedies of that?
Oh, that's an open-ended question there, Mr. Jim.
Yeah, I know.
The thing is the biggest, I'll tell you what our number one claim is always going to be easements. The biggest claim that is always acknowledged, because you have to make sure you have ingress, egress to a property. And especially you cannot sell a landlocked property. Well, let me rephrase it. You can sell one, you can purchase it, but most lenders will not allow you the opportunity to have a landlocked piece of property unless you have the means to get on it, unless you're going to use your helicopter to land on your property. So, but, during the hands of time is your driveway starts with a nice little half-shaped circle and you're going in there, but through the years you cut across that. And next thing you know, you're 3 inches or 3 feet into the neighbor's yard. And then, you're paying for real land. You're paying for that entity of property. So making sure that, adverse possession doesn't come in. That's a word that's used very loosely, but easements are our biggest claim. But some of the other things, you have questions regarding encroachments, fences. Do I have tideland rights? Do I have view rights? What are my covenants, conditions? Can I paint my house purple? Can I have livestock on my property? So there's endless opportunities. Judgments and liens, those are always out there that are lingering. And if they're not satisfied or if they haven't been fulfilled, they will carry on and haunt somebody until that information is properly conveyed. And our title department works very closely with our clients to make sure that that information is conveyed and cleared, or we get the documentation we need. So
good.
A lot of investigative work.
So when you find something, does that mean you can't buy the property, or are there solutions for that?
In some situations, I will say that it's never not that you can. Everything can be resolved. It's just how much time, energy, and money does it take, and how much time do you have? And if you're willing to wait for the process to be cleared, sometimes it's a matter of court cases. If it's in the middle of a court case and you have to wait till it's cleared, some clients are patient. They're not, they have the time and the means and the money to wait. Other ones, no, I need a house like yesterday. So that may be not the most ideal property for them. So in most cases, all items can be resolved. It just takes time, energy, money, and sometimes it takes the courts to get them resolved.
Okay, so we've kind of talked about title now. So we know that let's say we have a clean title now. We went through all the things, and maybe it's a little thing and they got a quick claim deed or something, or whatever they have to do. Mm-hmm. We're getting to the point where we talked to Carrie last week, for instance, about, there's certain type of documentation that you need for closing. And I've been kind of saying this the whole entire time to all of our buyers out there that are watching this. It's so important to get, like when you're asked for this information, to get it in as quickly as possible, because it's all the parties that are trying to get to the goal. I mean, we're all trying to get there. And if you're not staying on time, it takes a while. But what kind of documentation do you need? Or what kind will they be asked for that they'll need to fill out?
Well, typically, most times when a transaction's opened, there's information that we will need from that purchase and sale agreement. So if earnest money is applicable, what are the means to be able to get earnest money into your title and escrow company? There are 5 different means to be able to get that in there, and there's always a misconception. So you can drop off the earnest money check to the title company. We can set up a wire. You can drop it off at one of our locations. We also have an app called Zachem, which is an electronic earnest money check deposit. that they can use as well. And there's the snail mail. So that's always an option as well. So once the transaction's opened, we will send out opening documentations through Qualia, which is our communication platform system. And within there, we will review the purchase and sale agreement. And then upon us reviewing that contract, all parties, buyer and seller, will receive a document called an intake agreement. That intake agreement allows us the opportunity to get information on that buyer and the seller. So their middle name, their social security number, their date of birth, if there's a mortgage on the property, if there's utilities, if there's a homeowners association, all the documentation that we need to know, because escrow is a neutral third party. And our role is to hold funds and disseminate funds, and also follow written instructions on our purchase and sale agreement. So we can't make assumptions on what a purchase and sale agreement looks like. So we need to have that contract. We need to have that intake agreement filled out, because just because you filled out that information with the lender and you've been qualified through them, they have a lot of non-public information that's not disclosed to us. So we need to make sure when we're doing that title search to pull the title on the property as well as the individuals through the general index, because when we're pulling title on a purchase and sale agreement, we're pulling it for the buyer and the seller. There's always that misconception we're only doing it on the seller. It's like, nope, we're pulling it on that buyer as well to make sure that they don't have any judgments or liens or any of those items as well. So the intake agreement gives us their date of birth, their social security number, address, payoff information. And by them signing it, it allows escrow the opportunity to order payoffs for utilities and mortgages and any other items that we need in order to get final figures to pull together and for us to be able to balance with the lender when we get further down the transaction. So the biggest one is that intake agreement. Also, some of the documentations that will come out is once we've pulled out that title report, there may be some familiar names or other names that match that individual that's purchasing or selling, which then we may need a name affidavit to be filled out because there's similarities and we don't always receive the middle initial. We don't always get that intake agreement filled back with the date of birth. So that information will give us to find out if we have the right John Smith. Is it John W. Smith or is it John M. Smith? So there are a lot of things that happen behind the scenes with that additional documentation that escrow will need. Some of the other things that will come through is we'll need to have them, if they're going to be sending wires in and out, we have a third-party servicing company that we utilize called Certified, which validates that information's knowledge-based authentication. So with wire fraud being a really big thing in our industry, it's all over the world, but it definitely hits heavy on real estate and title and escrow. We've acquired this company to be able to check the credentials of the individual who is wiring those funds in and out to make sure that they are the correct person tied to that account. Exactly. So,
Vickie, let's talk about wire fraud a little bit, because it has hit our industry pretty hard. I mean, we're all doing our best we can, but I'm always telling my buyers and stuff, before you send any money, call me and if you get any changes or if you get anything that just doesn't feel right, or even if you think it feels right, just call me and I'll just come verify it, because it is happening out there a lot. And I know that's why you have to do your names and stuff. Do you want to talk a little bit about that too?
So wire fraud is real, and it's not something that you like to throw out there, but it has hit every title and escrow company. It's hit almost every lending institution and real estate office. If they want to admit it or not, it's real life. It has hit all of us. Now, if we've had to pay out, that's another story, but it is something that is very real. So Pacific Northwest Title, for at least for the last 4 years solid, we've made a point to have the software system, have secured emails, have password protected documentation. Another reason why we have Qualia. So every transaction we close, it goes through Qualia, which is a secured portal and communication platform from all parties on a contract. So we have clients that aren't tech savvy and don't want to do a password and don't want to do a website. That's okay. We have means to still send non-public information securely to them and not using the portal, but we do definitely encourage people to use Qualia because we have the insurance to back and support if for some reason we are hit from fraud. The other reason why we've implemented Certified, again, another platform to be able to validate a knowledge-based authentication for wires coming in and out. And if for some reason we are hit, then we have the insurance coverage to be able to save that. Because I'll tell you what, a title company or a lending institution, one or two $750,000 hits, that's going to hurt a company, and it could break a company. So it's something that we don't tread lightly on. We are very heightened awareness on that. Some of the other things, just to remind consumers, is every title company handles it a little differently, but Pacific Northwest Title will never send wiring instructions out without having a verbal conversation with the clients. And that's the one thing to always remember, that typically when we're sending funds out for a closing or funds need to coming into closing, that conversation will be had verbally on the phone when our escrow team is scheduling that signing appointment, not before. So, and it's one of those things to also remind your clients, it's like, me as your agent, I will never send you wiring instructions. Carrie, as your lender, will never send you wiring instructions. They will come from your escrow team. And if it seems premature, trust your gut. Contact your title company with the contact information from the opening notification, not any email correspondence that you're receiving or a text message. It doesn't come that way. It will always come from a verbal conversation. We'll schedule your signing appointment, and we'll work for the information on what funds need to come in, and then send the wiring instructions that way after they've used certified. So the one thing is just to remind them, and that the emails will never come from an AOL. They will never come from an MSN. They'll always come from a corporate.com title company. And again, trust your gut. If it doesn't feel right, contact your escrow company. We'd rather you ask 3-4 times versus send something and then ask, why haven't you responded? Well, we haven't received your funds.
And those guys are so tricky. It's coming over here like giggling because they're so tricky though. I mean, like, they might change like an I and put a number 1 in or something, and do a thing, and it looks, they'll have like the letterhead, and they'll have it's so legit looking. But don't. I just say always just call me. I'd rather call and say, hey, did you send out? Just want to make sure. Okay, great. My client will send it now. Thank you. You know what I mean?
I'm the same way. We talk about wire fraud all the time as well, because these are large amounts of money, and the criminals are very smart. Like you said, Niki, they can do things to make it look so legit. They steal letterheads. So it's just something definitely to be on the lookout for.
Well, I think the other thing is people are only purchasing real estate once or 3 times in their life. Mm-hmm. Truly, if they're blessed, they do it more than that. But you take it with face value. And some of the conversations that we have, and we've got a wire fraud class that's amazing. And if you ever get to watch it or be part of it, it's amazing. But they do share some of the little quirky parts of it. But it's like our clients trust us with what we do for a living. So they see a logo, they see a name. They're not sitting there and really scrutinizing the language within an email. If it's ever rushed, you need to do it like now, or this deal is going to resend, or we needed it yesterday, or there's incorrect spelling, and there's a different zip code, and there's a different area code in the phone number. They're not taking the time to really stop and look at what they're reviewing and the intent of the email. We're getting caught up in everything, and it's a lot of emotion and a lot of moving parts. And if you only do it once or twice in your life, how are you going to know? And how are you not going to take it with face value? So I think the biggest thing is reminding them to slow down. Yes, it's a crazy industry. It's a crazy process, and there's a lot of moving parts, but always ask the question, and don't be afraid to ask your partners, is this right? Is this normal? What's the typical turnaround time period? When should I be hearing from escrow? When do they typically ask for earnest money? When do they ask for proceeds to come into close? What's our typical turnaround time period? Okay, what's signing? When signing? When do we close? Do I have my keys tomorrow? It's just, it's those things, but also just hitting on the fraud aspect of it's like, before you push send and you do things, just go ahead and review it. And if you're not sure, pick up the phone. When in doubt, old school technology is wonderful, but there's something to be said about that phone when you're not sure, picking it up and asking the question. Because
I would always rather call my clients than have the opposite thing happen to them, because that is just heartbreaking. I've heard thankfully it hasn't happened to me or any of my clients, but I've heard stories that it just sounds absolutely heartbreaking because they lose or could possibly lose all their savings and everything else and any chance of buying a home. And it's horrible. So that's really good information. But But so let's go on and let's try to get to a happier topic, something that's not quite it's like, oh my.
I want to go over the signing. I mean, getting down to the signing. I've done this twice in the last 2 years, one for purchasing and one for refinancing. And I think if somebody's doing it for the first time, it's a huge amount of papers. And I've had mobile notaries the last 2 times, but maybe the different ways to sign and like power of attorney. We've got a lot of Navy people that might be out on a ship or whatever. So some of the different ways of signing.
So there are endless opportunities. So let's dial down. So your power attorneys. So if you have a power attorney that you're utilizing, we do live in a military town, and the military accesses those on a regular basis, specific or generic. So we utilize those, and those typically will give us the verbiage we need. They usually have sell and convey. As long as that key verbiage is in that power of attorney, it usually works for our underwriters. We always state, send us a copy of your power of attorney before your parties leave the area to make sure that we have what we need from our underwriters. But also, if it's for a purchaser, make sure you get a copy of that power of attorney over to that lender to make sure that it is a specific one. If they need, the address in there and the timeframes, and it has the proper verbiage for them in order to prepare the documents for closing once you have a signed around contract. So we also, if we have a file that is open, escrow can help prepare that power of attorney for those clients. And half of our staff are notaries, so we can assist with getting it notarized as well, if for some reason they don't have the means to use the military resources to be able to get them. So, but yeah, always, you can send a copy of that to title, let them review it. They'll give you a thumbs up, and then we can place it in the file for closing.
One of the main things, whether it's military or you're traveling or you're moving into state or moving out of state or whatever, one of the biggest things I tell the buyers too is to always make sure your real estate person knows, like, I'm going to be in town for closing, or I'm not going to be in town for closing, because I don't know how many times it's like getting down the wire, like, oh, well, I was going to go on vacation. It's like, oh, wait a minute. We need to do this and this and this before you go on vacation, because it's kind of important you're here for signing.
It baffles me. Almost, there are so many transactions that close and people take a vacation. I'm like, holy cow.
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
And you're like, oh, is that important? Do I need to tell you? I'm like, yeah, we kind of need to know, because, on a buyer side, most lenders won't allow you to do a remote online notarization signing. They won't let you do a RON signing. So if you can't do a RON signing, then we have to orchestrate for a mobile notary, which is not a problem. But, sometimes it's a matter of timing and location. And are you traveling? Do you have the means to stop? Again, there's just a lot of moving parts in that. So again, one more layer to that unique process of, sorry, my computer's about dying too, Jim. I was with you too.
And it's so important to let us know. I have a transaction going on right now where a quit claim deed is going to need to be signed. And one of the parties that needs to sign that quit claim is going out of the country just 2 days before the loan is supposed to close. She let me know today. So that's wonderful, because closing is not until the beginning of March. But, there have been times that I've been surprised, like, oh, I thought you were going to be in Washington, but you're going to be in California. Okay, well, we need to make sure we have enough time to get them notarized in a different state. But most importantly, is that they have to be FedExed back, because when it comes to recording, Vickie, correct me if I'm wrong, but you need original documents with the original wet signature in order to file with the county.
We do have the means to, yes, the obligation is to have those original documents so we can scan them in. We do e-record almost all of our documents with the county, but it does require for us to have those original documents when we do record them. As part of our simple file requirements is having those original documents. Sometimes we can record it with the documentation and notation that original documents to come, and then we re-record those. But those are case-by-case situations. But yes, we do have to have those original documents. So, and to your question is how many options are there to sign? Old school, traditional, pen and paper, signing away. Traditional signings usually take on a seller side anywhere between 15 and 30 minutes ish. Okay. It's always the client's rights to take as much time as they want and review. It's the biggest thing they're going to buy or sell, so it's their right to review every document. But traditionally, sellers usually take about 15 to 30 minutes. Purchasers, 45 minutes to an hour on the norm. If you have a full signing, we have the means within our office we have 2 courtesy signers. But again, almost 60% of our staffs are notaries, and any one of us can take care of a signing and participate. I have a notary stamp will travel, so I do a lot of the offsite signings. They like to send me to the nursing homes and all that good stuff like that. So I get added to Christmas card lists. It's always kind of fun. I've got extended family everywhere. So traditional is the standard signing, which is pen on paper. Then you'll also hear the information regarding a hybrid. A hybrid signing is where the lending institution will send majority of the documents. Carrie, correct me if I'm wrong, probably about 40%, 50% of the documents over electronically. And
I think it's even more than that. We are down to about an 80% closing package where they only have to sign about 4 documents that need to have an ink signature to be recorded with the county.
So, which then they do those DocuSign or e-sign, and then the rest of the documents are sent to escrow. All the documents are sent to us, but then we pull out the ones that need to be signed, and those are traditionally the ones that need to be notarized and have that wet signature. And then there's also some escrow documents that we need to have them fill out. So those are called hybrid signings. We also do hybrid signings internally as well. Most of those, the lender will send the documents to the consumers, and the day that they sign with escrow is the same day that they have to DocuSign those documents with that same date stamp to get those over to the lender for review. We do them in-house as well. Sometimes we'll do hybrids right then and there because the client didn't have time to do them on their own. So we will go through the digital part, and then we'll do the wet signature with them as well. Still usually takes about 45 minutes. The biggest thing is getting the DocuSign credentials uploaded and all that information. And then,
excuse me.
Yeah, go ahead. You got it.
Vickie, I was wondering, do you ever have this, maybe out left field, but do you ever have people that are signing and then they go, I didn't know I was signing for this, or I didn't know this, that you have to kind of remedy? And how important is it to have somebody that's very experienced in people skills and all that to walk through that?
Well, in my 20 years, I've had 1 or 2 of those unique signing situations, and sometimes they're salvageable and sometimes they're not. And it also depends on what the circumstance that has created that chaos in the moment or that uncertainty. So if it is something regarding their contractual obligation regarding the property, traditionally we'll reach out to the agent. But if it's regarding the transaction itself and the financing, as a neutral third party and as that notary, I can't decipher the terms of their loan. So we can break down what's on that paper, but anything that they feel that is not correct or they disagree with, that's when I would pick up the phones. You know what, let's go ahead and give Carrie a call, and let's see if we can get Carrie or someone from her processing team to answer your question of concern.
Okay.
And then
so
that's
really, it's important that everybody is doing their job.
You know, again, it's one of those things. I don't want to decipher Carrie's profession. They're a lending professional, and we are that title and escrow. So, you know, I try to stick to my trade. But again, if I say the wrong thing and I'm incorrect, then I've stepped into a position and put myself in a sense of liability. So I would call Carrie and say, you know what, I have Mr. and Mrs. Smith here, Carrie. They have some questions about their loan. Do you mind if I put you on speaker? I'll put them on speaker. If they want to, I'm happy to step out. You guys have a conversation. Just open the door when you're ready. And then if they can come to a resolution, then winner, chicken dinner, we continue on with their signing and all is correct. If they don't agree and say, you know what, this is not what I signed up for, I'm not going to sign. As that neutral third party, I can't make them sign. It's like, okay. Said, okay, well, I will contact Carrie. We'll get a hold of the lenders. We'll be in touch, and we'll see if we can find means to make this work for everyone and move forward. If not,
but very rare. Yeah.
It doesn't happen that often because traditionally with
and if everybody has done their job.
Exactly. You know, professionals like Carrie, professionals like you and Niki, if you've done your part to explain the process and what they're coming into contract to, it's certainly a surprise. But again, last minute conditions do come up, and there's a lot of jargon that people don't understand or they're not used to. It's like, okay, well, then you start confusing. Okay, I've had 3 closing disclosures. The first one was this one, but you've changed your term. You've changed this, or we had to extend because there was documentation you didn't get in underwriting in time. So it pushed our closing date out, which makes your ratio different. You know, so there's different things that come into play and that we forget. Or if you up a closing and adjust your rate schedules, or they didn't realize, some of the biggest misconceptions is I didn't realize my tax and insurance were going to be included on this. I didn't want an impound account. Well, I didn't want PMI. I don't want private mortgage insurance. Well, I didn't know this. These are things that through the process they're made aware of. Sometimes you just forget. So, and then they're like, well, what is this? And why do I have it? It's like, okay, this is what the intent is. This is what you can expect. And then if it's still not sinking in, just because they need to hear it presented in a different manner, then we call the loan officer or we get a hold of the agent, whichever one. And sometimes when we can't get a hold of them, that's when, as a signer, you're sitting there. It's like, okay, well, I can't make you sign. It's up to you. We can try your lender again. If not, then we may have to reconvene tomorrow. We might have to get an extension, depending on how close we are to closing or not.
Okay, so I'm gonna kind of recap on what you've all said. So pretty much what our escrow and title and escrow company, what they do, and sometimes it's the same and sometimes it's a different company. So it could be the same company, could be different company. A lot of times if they work together, it's easier. It just makes things go smoothly. But so they're a neutral party to both sides. They are not representing either side. They're actually just working to get the process done. And title is the one who's going to clear up all your any titles or any of the issues against the property themselves. Then you've got escrow, which is going to come in and make sure that it's both parties are who they are and that they're following am I getting this right? And everything is going to follow the way it's supposed to go as far as what the contract says, right? Okay. And so you guys have been working really, really, really hard here. What kind of closing costs or what are closing costs? I mean, because we're getting to the point where we signed, we've got the power of attorney, we've talked about notaries, we've talked about watching out for fraud. So we're getting to closing costs. Closing costs, sometimes they think, just one person pays them, but that's not true, is it?
No.
It's both parties, guys.
You want to tap on this? It's kind of a dual side type of situation, In your title escrow fees, traditionally you're going to see that buyer's net sheet or that loan estimate from the lending institution or your agent prior to coming into closing. And traditionally it's a 1% to 2% average of your sales price of what your fees are going to be. There's no magical equation that's going to give you what your title and escrow fees are. It's based on sales price and it's a tiered price point for title and escrow. VA transactions, there are some non-allowables, so they don't pay for their escrow, but the title fees, if there is a lender involved, that buyer typically pays for that lender's policy. And if the seller traditionally pays for that homeowner's policy. So for that buyer coming in, as long as them and their heirs live in that property, they will cover that one-time premium for that sales price for that new homeowner's policy. So, and again, it varies anywhere between $700 to thousands of dollars based upon your sales price. So all title companies are pretty much about close same price points. They're anywhere between $50 to $100 from each other. We're governed by the Office of Insurance Commissioner. We have to file our rates. So there's no wild and crazy rates out there. Eventually, we probably in the next year or so, they've been talking about that for 4 years. We will have a rating bureau where all title companies in the state of Washington will have the same title rates.
Oh, that's nice.
Escrow. So it'll be a rating bureau and we'll all be on the same ballpark no matter what title company you work for. Your escrow fees will be the only differentiating price point. But until then, yes, we're all off between $50 to $100 from each other.
Hey,
And
Vickie,
just to
there's,
differentiate,
excuse
Vickie,
me.
you were saying about the closing costs. There's just a few set ones that would come from you, and then the rest have to do with your lending institution. So
Yep.
there's going to be an escrow fee. There's going to be, most of the time, a lender's title insurance policy, and then recording fees. Those are the
Recording
fees that you're
excise.
going to see from the escrow and title company.
Yep.
And the taxes, which a lot of
And excise tax. Yep.
But that falls more on the seller's side, the excise tax. Yeah.
And so, Vickie, there's the last step, which is the great news. The people are going to get their keys, which I think is
right?
the
Not at
exciting
signing.
piece. I think
Not at
it's
signing.
Oh,
Not
no, they
at signing.
correct.
but
Tell
what happens on closing
the
day?
last
You're
step.
dispersing funds.
So traditionally, there's always that misconception. We always joke about it. It's like, okay, I've signed. Do I get keys now? It's like, no, we just did signing today. Signing doesn't always mean closing. Sometimes it's a same day closing fund, which we still can do those. But traditionally, you've signed your documents. Escrow has reviewed the documents. They've notarized them. They've sent them up and they've scanned them in and sent them to the lender for review. Once the lender has reviewed the documents, they will make sure that our figures and their figures balance. We haven't missed any signatures. We've met all the guidelines in their underwriting department of what needed to be done from the documents. We've scanned them in, they reviewed them, and then they will contact escrow and say, okay, we're good to go. We have released to record. So which that means is they will release the funds for closing. Once that has landed into our trust account, then we will send the documents down to the courthouse for recording. So they'll go to the auditor and the treasurer's office and make sure taxes are paid, recording is taken care of. And then we send all documents down through Simple File for e-recording. There's only a couple documents and transactions that we cannot send through e-record, and those are transactions with mobile homes, transactions with forest land, and or if there's an easement that needs to be recorded before the deed of trust. And that stands for all title companies because there's just too many departments that have to go through the process. So it doesn't make it Simple File. So those are the only transactions. And then we just hurry those down there or take them down ourselves. So once we get recording numbers, we release that, and we can get recording numbers within 10 minutes. It could take 4 hours to get recording numbers. It just depends on what the county's volume is and where it sits in the queue to get recording numbers. Once we get recording numbers, then we will contact the agents, the lender, the buyer, the seller.
The keys. And that's the one.
Yeah, I'll say congratulations. Yay! Your check is in the mail. You can have your keys. Touch base with your agent.
Reach that finish line.
Yeah, right?
That's great.
You know, in the full-on transactions, they can take anywhere between 5 days. They can take as long as 3 days. The average transactions are coming in within 22 days. Closing within 22 business days.
Oh,
Can
wow.
they be done sooner? Yes. Appraisals are coming in. We're not carrying. You can vouch for this or not. We haven't seen too many coming in low. They're pretty standard right now. We'll see 1 or 2 here or there, but the turnaround timeframes on those are coming around quite quickly. So when we're seeing that, then people are wanting to get their transactions closed sooner. So, which we have the means to be able to accommodate that. So, did I answer your question?
Yes,
You got your keys now.
beautiful.
We have our keys. It's always
Woo! So then once we have that, then if you're receiving any proceeds, agents will get their commissions disseminated. If the seller is getting proceeds, we'll either send them out wire or they can pick up their check, or we can send them out through FedEx or courier. And the same thing with the purchaser. And then after closing, we'll send out final closing settlement documents to all parties involved in the transaction. And then that new purchaser, once that warranty deed has been recorded, they'll get a copy of that at the transfer, and then they will get a title report after closing acknowledging their policy. And then if they have any questions for the time that them and their heirs own their property, for any encroachments or questions about anyone in their title report, they can call that title company at any given time, and they can review that title report with them and see if any concerns is a valid claim or not. One-time policy of peace of mind.
All right. You guys, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you joining it, Jim and I, and coming on and being a part of this. And we hope everybody out there who has seen this has gotten something from it. I know I've got a lot of really positive feedback from people who've seen it and said, you know, this is some great information and didn't know that. And it was very helpful. So we definitely appreciate you guys' time today. Good luck to your daughter, Vickie.
Thank you.
Yes, good luck.
Thank
Can
you.
you remind me,
I'm sorry.
what team is she on?
She's with Bethune Cookman from Daytona Beach in Florida. So we're in Palm Springs for Marionetta Fast Pitch Tournament here in Palm Springs.
On the map.
Nice.
Siri's telling me exactly where I'm going. I want to go to Florida. It sounds great.
I love Florida. I know, right?
Anyway, give your daughter our best and have fun.
you.
And enjoy your time with her. Family is so important. Carrie, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to have you on.
Yeah.
Thank you for
And-
having me again.
Thank you. Hopefully you guys found value in the information. And if I can come back and
wonderful.
be a guest speaker, feel
Absolutely.
free. Love the
Yes.
opportunity. Thanks for
You're
your time
such a
today,
pro.
guys.
Thank you.
You're
Yeah.
welcome, you guys. All right. Appreciate you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank
You
you.
too.
Carrie, we will see you next week for talking about buying versus renting. So it should be another really great one to not miss.
Yes, for sure.
Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful day. Thanks
Bye,
for joining
guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
us. Bye-bye.